Listen, I come from a family where my mother works in an office, and stories like this are very close to my heart. This isn't just content for the sake of use. It's real life experience that I turn into stories so that we can all learn from ourselves and not repeat other people's mistakes. All names, addresses, and companies in the video are fictional, of course, but the essence is real. And this is what happens when you think you're in control of everything, but in reality, you're not.
He didn't even knock, just strolled into my office with that smug half smile like he already owned the place and said, "You still routing through legacy enclaves? We'll need those phased out by Q2. No greeting, no intro, just a thinly veiled dismissal of 11 years of precision. I set my pen down. Slowly. I didn't bother correcting him, not yet. Because the part he didn't understand, the part no one ever thought about until things broke, was that Kendricks's entire freight architecture wasn't held together by dashboards or fancy procurement metrics. It ran on rules, on rhythm, and I was the one who'd written them, tuned them, protected them. My name was etched into the backbone of every synchronized node ping between Sao Paulo and Rotterdam, not for credit, for control. The irony? He thought I was just another route admin who needed reminding that the new head of supply chain held the reins now. But I didn't need a title to control the arteries of a 700-mailer logistics operation. He walked out with a wave, calling over his shoulder, "Schedule time with my EA to hand off what you are managing." Not if I have anything to say about it, I thought. Hey, if you're listening and you're into these kinds of real strategic takedowns, do me a favor. Hit the like button and subscribe. 97% of people forget to, and it seriously helps the team keep delivering these stories. I'd seen execs come and go. Most didn't notice the real engine room, where the shipments got greenlit, where customs forms aligned within milliseconds to avoid penalties, where fleet routes adjusted in real time against weather and protests and port congestion. That engine room was mine, not by hierarchy, by function. Because without my access layers, nothing moved. Not legally, not safely, not fast enough. And Mason hadn't even figured out the difference between overlay protocol and core enclave logic before putting my name on his damn whiteboard under sunset targets. I saw it when I passed the conference room the next day, him pointing, full of buzzwords, full of bluster, surrounded by younger analysts nodding like they understood what backbone simplification even meant. He was loud. He liked control through noise. I preferred silence and results. And unlike Mason, I read every word of the contract Kendricks made me sign after acquiring my last firm. He never asked why my team had stayed external until 2017. He never dug into the custodial architecture or the licensing renewal protocols. And I sure as hell didn't volunteer the information. You don't show your hand until someone tries to steal it. So when he scheduled a review of ownership transition of legacy stacks, I RSVP'd with a smile. Let them gather their little audit party. I'd already made copies, time-stamped and notarized of every custodial clause tied to the routing infrastructure, especially Section 6.3b, which no one had dared test, until now. It started subtle, like all bad ideas do. A few comments in meetings about redundant layers, some flashy slides on streamlined protocols, and one too many references to visibility across verticals. None of it had technical depth, but it was dressed in just enough buzzwords to impress the execs who didn't know a routing key from a railroad switch. Then came the system probes. My assistant, Claire, sharp as hell, flagged them first. "There's unusual activity in the node auth logs," she said, not even looking up from her console. "Somebody's scraping license tags from the Enclave backups and digging through archived APIs." I didn't ask who. I already knew. I had spent 11 years architecting a system that wasn't just functional, it was bulletproof. Modular enclaves, encrypted syncs, rotating keys. It wasn't built to be pretty. It was built to survive international customs seizures, fuel shortages, corrupt port officials, and mid-journey route flips when wildfires closed Pacific Rail. Mason didn't get that. He just saw legacy architecture and decided to make it his personal mission to clean house. No clue what he was sweeping out. He finally confronted me after a vendor strategy sync. We were standing outside the conference room, neutral ground until he made it otherwise. "Your routes still run through your enclave architecture, right?" he asked, casual but clipped. "Bit outdated." I kept my voice even. Efficient, I said. Resilient. He smiled like he'd just solved a riddle no one else could crack. Well, we'll be rerouting everything through command center protocols by Q3. Real-time optimization, fewer silos, more visibility. I let him enjoy his little speech. Then I asked, "You checked the custodial clauses, right?" He hesitated, blinked. "Legal has it," he said. I nodded once. Good. That was a lie. Legal didn't have it. Not really. Not the version I had signed when Kendricks absorbed my boutique firm back in 2012. I'd kept that clause intact through 6 renewals and 2 restructuring cycles. Section 6.3b. Nobody had touched it. Most didn't even know what it meant. It wasn't just a clause. It was a trapdoor. Because while Kendricks owned the hardware and paid the licenses and waved around contracts like they meant something, control, actual control, that was governed by custodial authority, my authority, and it was irrevocable unless a 90-day transition was filed before any personnel action, meaning if they fired me or tried to reassign me without that transition in place, the entire routing stack defaulted to deadlock. They could probe all they wanted. They could print out diagrams and mock my architecture on whiteboards. But the second they tried to flip control without me, they'd be demanding keys that weren't theirs to hold. Thursday morning, 9:47 a.m. I knew the moment I walked past the glass door to ops and saw Mason's laptop open, his shoulders hunched, his assistant nowhere in sight. It was showtime. He didn't look up when I stepped in, didn't bother with preamble, just tapped a few keys, then said, flat and rehearsed, "You're done. Effective now. Hand over the network routes. We'll assign a contractor to extract your stack." No, thank you for your service. No acknowledgement that the last 11 years of seamless freight movement across half the planet had run through my architecture. Just a line read from a script, one he probably typed himself while sipping his second cold brew and fantasizing about Gartner Awards. I stood there for a second, quietly. There were 3 other people in the room. None of them looked at me. A data analyst pretending to work, a junior engineer with his earbuds still in, and a sysadmin named Ellis, barely out of school, who once asked me what a parity gate was. He glanced up. I caught his eye and smiled. Then I stepped forward and placed a slim envelope on the table next to Mason's elbow. "Sorry," I said, just loud enough. "Those aren't yours to demand." That made him look up. My badge went down beside the envelope. I didn't linger. No speech, no dramatic pause, just a quiet turn and a calm walk toward the door. Behind me, I heard a chair shift. I knew it was Ellis. I could feel him staring like someone had just thrown a breaker in his mind. Let them try to extract my stack. The routing enclave wasn't just a set of files or credentials you could drag into a folder. It was a layered architecture built on tiered permissions, modular encryptions, dynamic authentication tied to a physical token I no longer carried. Every route was licensed, custodial access granted by signature, maintained through a 90-day rotating protocol, and, here's the key, not transferable without initiating a formal buyout or transition window, which of course they hadn't done. That envelope? It held a notarized statement citing Section 6.3b of my original integration contract, plus a digital audit log confirming no transition protocols had been initiated. A second copy had already been delivered to Kendricks Legal, time-stamped 2 hours prior. Termination before transition? Congratulations, Mason. You just activated a clause you didn't even know existed, and you've got 12 business days before the entire routing infrastructure locks you out permanently. By 3 p.m., they were scrambling, not just legal, everyone. Mason was pacing the second floor like he could outrun the terms of a contract he hadn't read. And downstairs, the general counsel's door had been closed for over an hour, but I already knew what they'd found. Section 6.3b, 3rd paragraph, 4th line. It wasn't buried. It was just ignored. Routing infrastructure built on proprietary enclaves shall remain under custodial license, revocable only via 90-day transition protocol or full buyout. That line, 16 words, was the reason no one could log into the core root matrix, the reason the São Paulo node was already out of sync, the reason their backup contractors couldn't even see the enclave layers, let alone edit them. Custodial license meant the code and protocols remained mine. Licensed to Kendricks, not owned. The minute they fired me without triggering a transition window, that license reverted to its default state. Inactive. Locked. They assumed a badge swipe would be enough to replace what I'd built. But this wasn't a desk or a laptop. This was infrastructure. And infrastructure, if you don't control it properly, bites back. The buyout figure? $16.7 million plus $75,000 per day in penalties after the 5th business day. That was the clause after 6.3b, the one no one ever bothered to redline because it looked like boilerplate. It wasn't. I wrote it myself, years ago, when Kendricks acquired our firm and I negotiated the terms of integration over a 6-month legal chess match. They could have changed it. They didn't. When the GC finally spoke, it was clipped and dry. It's binding. Mason's response? It's absurd. The COO's face said more. He wasn't arguing. He was sweating. Legal requested an emergency call with me through back channels. I didn't respond. My counsel did. Politely, professionally, with a time-stamped copy of the licensing clause and a suggestion that further inquiries be submitted in writing. The thing about control is, it's rarely about who yells the loudest. It's about who read the damn paperwork. And right now, the only person who understood what was happening was the one they'd pushed out the door with a 2-sentence termination notice and a plan to extract the stack. Good luck with that. By day 2, it was already unraveling. São Paulo's reroute stalled for 6 hours after the port's customs inspection sync timed out. That single delay rerouted 22 containers, 17 of them temperature sensitive, and cost Kendricks over $300,000 in missed SLAs. The Rotterdam hub hit a glitch next. Customs tag batches failed mid-cycle because the Enclave API handshake never completed. Their engineers tried to trigger a manual override, but without the Enclave's rolling auth keys, the system didn't even acknowledge the command. I watched it unfold from a distance, quietly, precisely. 3 major vendors called by noon. All of them had contracts referencing my credentials as the custodial signatory for routing protocols. No signature, no lane priority. Period. One rep from Dynafleet, Kendricks' largest rail logistics partner, called procurement directly. If Grant's out, he said, we'll need a full contract review before we move another shipment. J. Solus Group, who handled high-value imports through the EU corridor, asked bluntly, "Where's your logistics architect? Without her, we pause renewal." No one answered. Mason, in true Mason fashion, snapped at the infrastructure team. Just rebuild it. They tried. God, they tried. But my scripts were modular, encrypted, rotated monthly, and authenticated against a chain of custody that could only be reset through a custodial token. That token no longer lived in the building. And even if they cracked the structure, which they wouldn't, it still required a signature, stored offline, notarized and validated through a dead man switch protocol that triggered the moment HR pulled my badge. Their systems didn't fail because I sabotaged anything. They failed because I left them alone. The roots didn't obey because they weren't built to respond to orders. They were built to respond to trust. And that trust had been terminated. Behind the scenes, I heard whispers, panic mostly. Finance didn't understand why penalties were escalating. Legal was trying to locate the last signed routing matrix and couldn't find the current copy. Mason was demanding action from teams who didn't have access. The COO tried reaching out to vendors only to be told they weren't authorized points of contact under the existing SLAs. I didn't gloat. I didn't even call my lawyer that day, because I knew the system better than anyone. Knew how it breathed, how it resisted bad commands, knew what would happen next. This wasn't revenge. This was gravity, and they had just stepped off the edge without looking down. Tick. Day 3. That was the thing about Section 6.3b. It didn't just protect the architecture, it counted down. From the exact moment of unauthorized termination, Kendricks had 12 business days to either initiate a proper transition protocol or complete a full buyout. If neither occurred, custodial access wouldn't just remain revoked, it would be permanently unrecoverable without breach litigation and a federal injunction. They'd need a court order just to read the routing tables. On day 3, one of our largest North American clients rerouted $8.2 million in freight to a competitor. Not because they wanted to, because the route validation failed mid-transfer. When their OPIUS lead reached out to Kendricks, they got a vague statement about system realignment. They weren't buying it. They flipped the switch and moved their assets. Fast. On day 5, word got out. A compliance flag was posted on a closed vendor forum. Industry insiders only. One of my old colleagues at Rail Access pinged me privately. Heads up, Kendricks just hit the list. Under compliance review. You okay? I didn't answer. Just acknowledged the message. Procurement tried to clean it up, releasing a statement about ongoing modernization, but the damage was done. Vendors don't like ambiguity. They like authority, and that authority used to come from my login. Now it came from no one. By day 6, the board caught wind. I was on a walk, coffee in hand, sun out, when the email came in. From a board member I'd spoken to twice in 11 years. The subject line read, "Touching base." I didn't open it. I just forwarded it to my counsel and kept walking. The leverage didn't come from me making noise. It came from me doing nothing. That's what made it lethal. I had no social media post, no press leak, no angry statement. Just the clause, just the timer, just the silence that followed when a 700-mile logistics firm realized their entire operational nervous system had an expiration date, and that clock was running. Mason? He'd gone quiet. HR? Disoriented? Legal? Desperate for a way out that didn't require wiring $16.7 million before the next board call. I didn't rush them. That would have been unprofessional. They had 6 business days left. Let's see what they did with them. I didn't wait for the panic to reach its peak. By the time Kendricks was issuing internal memos about temporary disruptions and retention protocol audits, I'd already signed elsewhere. AccessLog reached out the morning after my badge was disabled. I didn't send a resume. They didn't ask for one. We spoke once, 40 minutes on a secure call. Their CEO, Elena Park, didn't waste time on flattery. She said, "We've tracked your system architecture for years. We want the mind behind it, not the code." They made the offer that same day. I joined them the following Monday. No back channels, no poaching scandal, just a clean, immediate transition. Custodial systems partner with full autonomy and zero bureaucratic handholding. AccessLog had global aspirations and none of Kendricks' executive bloat. They knew what I could build. More importantly, they knew how to let me build it. Mason tried to contact me on day 8. First, it was a message on my personal number. Quick call? Like we were old colleagues, like he hadn't publicly gutted my role in front of a room full of techs. Then came the email. Subject line, realignment discussion. Body, we'd like to explore options. Can we fix this? He signed it, Best Mason. My lawyer responded, per clause 6.3b and current custodial protocols, all communications must proceed through licensed channels. Direct outreach is not permitted. We didn't hear back. Around the same time, Kendricks' procurement team wired $8.35 million to a custodial escrow account, half the buyout value. Publicly, they labeled it a retention reconciliation, an internal term meant to suggest continuity, not desperation. But the vendor forums read between the lines. So did the markets. Their board didn't issue a statement. Their COO stopped appearing on investor calls. And Mason? Still listed on the company site, but now under Strategic Development Projects, a title that sounded important and meant nothing. Me? I didn't blink. I was already rewriting the next generation of routing logic, leaner, smarter, unbreakable, this time without warning anyone where the custodial clause lived. Let them try and find it. The boardroom was silent, except for the low hum of the projector as it clicked to the next slide. Slide 1. Custodial Trigger Activated, Section 6.3b. The title alone was enough to sink stomachs. The GC stood at the front, voice calm, matter of fact. As previously reported, termination was executed without a valid transition protocol in place. The clause triggered an automatic revocation of access to all routing enclaves. No rollback is possible without full custodial buyout. No one spoke. Slide 2 followed. Unrecoverable routing lag, 17.2% impact. Beneath the heading, metrics scrolled. Delayed freight volume, contract penalties, rerouted shipments, compliance breaches. Every column painted the same picture. Kendricks' bleeding time, money, and credibility. Mason sat 3 chairs from the end. Still. Pale. Slide 3 hit like a fist. Partial buyout paid. Further risk unmitigated. The CEO turned slowly toward him. You didn't review the licensing schema. Her voice was low, but it carried. He opened his mouth, maybe to defend himself, maybe to lie. We'll never know, because the general counsel cut him off before a word could land. He was warned, verbally and in writing, twice. The room stayed quiet. Then the audit lead's phone buzzed. She read the message, blinked once, then held it up without a word. The GC stepped forward to take it. She scanned it quickly, then turned back to the room. Axis Log just secured the Asia-Pacific Corridor contract. Kendricks is no longer the primary routing partner. The silence cracked. A breath here, a whisper there. The board members shifted, uncomfortable in their chairs. The COO rubbed his temples like that might rewind the last 3 months. Mason? He didn't speak again. The meeting moved on. Budget scenarios, emergency restructuring, outside council recommendations. But none of it mattered. The damage had been baked in the moment they treated the infrastructure like a switch to be flipped, not a system to be understood. And me? I wasn't in the room. Didn't need to be. My name wasn't on any slide, but my structure was. And my silence? It was the loudest voice in the building. Axis Log didn't announce my arrival with any fanfare. No press release, no email blast. Just a quiet addition to their executive portal, 3rd row from the top. Grant Voss, Custodial Systems Partner. No photo, no bio, just the title. A sentence that carried more weight than any article ever could. Across the industry, people noticed. Quietly, strategically. Contracts shifted without warning. Inquiries to Kendricks slowed, then stalled. Procurement officers at firms I'd once architected integrations for started rechecking their SLA clauses, asking subtle questions about routing continuity. Axis Log didn't comment. They didn't need to. At Kendricks, the fallout kept trickling downward. Mason was reassigned to Special Projects, a title that meant nothing and promised less. An internal memo leaked. Brief, clinical. It cited critical oversights in legacy infrastructure custody. No names. But everyone knew. I didn't respond. Didn't call anyone. Didn't forward the memo to press. Instead, I updated one folder. Just one. My original system index stored off-network and time-stamped quarterly, redlined notes, access history, and an archive of every contract ever tied to Enclave routing. I added a line at the bottom. Just a single sentence. Custodian access, still active, still mine. I closed the folder, logged out, went back to work. Because dominance doesn't require noise, just structure, just foresight, just a clause they never bothered to read until it was too late.